Welcome to Teaching Restored. I'm Kevin Jones.
And I'm Julie Hilliard.
And we talk about how to teach the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And we've had some good episodes so far. We've learned some good things, but today I want to start off with a question, Julie. And this question is not, and I have not prepped you, and I told you I would not prep you with this question. And oh boy, here we go. Julie, are you a good teacher?
Wow. Sometimes.
Okay. How do you know?
So actually, can I share a quick little story?
Please. Yes.
So I remember when I was younger, I wanted to be a teacher. And then I remember when it was in Young Women's or something like that, I was teaching for something and I'm like, I am actually a really bad teacher. Like nobody paid attention. Like I just had this terrible experience teaching. And then I remember fast forward, so I started teaching in the prison and I'm like, hey, they listen to me. And then I realized, oh, it's because I'm the only woman that they see ever because I was teaching men. So I was like, can't flatter yourself. And so I remember though, I always wanted to be a teacher. And it wasn't until I started teaching and realized that giving good information did not a good teacher make. Like I could be as prepared as I wanted for a class, and I wouldn't feel like I was a good teacher at the end of it. And I realized that the times when I feel like a good teacher don't come from me. They come from the fact that I knew the Spirit was in that experience. And that's the only way. It's not compliments that people give you. When the validation didn't come externally, I used to feel disappointed in myself. And then I realized that validation, that feedback is not really actually important to me.
Good.
But it took some confidence to get to that point where I'm like, the only validation I really need is from the Spirit. So my answer is sometimes, because sometimes I'm not that good at it.
Okay. I like that a lot. We are all good teachers and not so good teachers sometimes. Correct?
Casey, everybody would answer it that way. Would you say the same thing?
Well, I do because when I say teachers, I think someone who is teaching when they are in a classroom setting, they may not be as great about that, but they may be great in a totally different setting.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Right?
That's a great. Yeah.
All right. So I think in some contexts or if I'm teaching a Sunday school class, sometimes I'm good at it and sometimes I'm not. Right.
But if I'm teaching adults, I'm fine. If I'm teaching youth,
right, there you go. Right.
Is that kind of what you mean?
Right. So how do we know what to work on? How do you teach an adult institute type class, right?
Right.
How do you know what you should work on to be a better teacher, facilitator, etc.?
I actually seek feedback.
How?
So I ask questions of the people that are in the class. And when I say I seek feedback, I also really try to perceive feedback, if that makes sense. Like I'm paying attention to body language. I'm paying attention to participation. Body language is actually probably the biggest one for me, even more than participation, because I think that people can participate and not, like, you can still sense that you're losing people.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, and here's something interesting. So I also teach the seniors in Sunday school, like the seniors in school, and what I need to work on in there is completely different than what I need to work on in the other one.
That's a good point.
So bad. But I think it really is by seeking feedback and being observant enough to take in feedback that they're giving you without even meaning to give you feedback.
Okay. There are
I don't know what you're leading to, so this is really me being organic. Kevin genuinely did not prep me with anything.
Nothing.
I don't even know the topic today.
So what I want to, I liked two things that specifically that you mentioned. Number one is that you cared enough to look for feedback.
Okay.
I think that a lot of times that isn't happening, where what do we need to do? How can we be a better facilitator, teacher, guide, that we're not seeking that feedback sometimes, and granted, totally get it. Sometimes I just got to get through the lesson. I'm scared to death. I don't know. I think of this wonderful couple in our ward right now. One has been baptized within the last year, and the other has become more active within the last year, and they are teaching primary, and they're doing such a good job. And I've heard from others where one has said, I don't know that I'm doing well at this at all, because I don't know. I'm trying to teach these primary kids something that I'm just learning myself. And I remember my wife saying that when she was teaching primary first, her first big calling after she was baptized, they're probably teaching me more than I'm teaching them, kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so I totally get that. Sometimes we're just trying to get through the lesson and we're not looking for feedback.
Right.
But sometimes we'll get to the point where we need to start getting feedback. Now, I want to tell you a quick story. I was working for a company, and I was in charge of instruction. So training, instruction, instructional design, delivery, all that stuff for this company. And we were doing kind of a train the trainer session. So we were rolling out this big, major new software for everyone. And we were going to train the trainers, and they were going to go train their people, but we had to get them going and get them in the mode of, you are a teacher, you are a trainer, this is kind of how you do it. So I spent like a half a day with them at one point, and we were all in this conference room, and really a training room around this big conference table. And I said, oh, by the way, my wife knew we were doing this, and she baked some cookies for everyone. So here you go. And they took the cookies and passed it around napkins, and they each took a cookie, and they're like, oh yeah. And I watched them go, like that, right? Okay. For those of you who are just listening, the most horrible face. And I just went on as if nothing had happened. And each one of them did that. And they took a bite, and then they put it down, and no one took another bite. They just,
oh my gosh, Kevin, that's so funny. That is so funny.
What they didn't know is that I asked her to bake the cookies with so much salt it would make your mouth hurt.
Okay, so this was on purpose.
This is totally intentional.
Okay.
Totally intentional, right? And so they took a bite, and they're like, oh, and they put it down, and I just keep going with what I'm teaching, and they didn't hear a word I said after that. Right? They were lost in this. His wife has no idea how to cook. Either she doesn't know, or one of the kids snuck in a whole bunch of extra salt, because this is right? Off on a total different tangent, and they're thinking about something else. And as I'm going, I'm talking, and I say, okay, wait, hold on a sec. I've noticed none of you are eating your cookie. Why is that? No one would say anything. And I said, you guys, come on. I had my wife put extra salt in it, and I know how they taste. And they're like, okay. Oh my goodness. Whoo! My whole point was that if you don't get feedback, you'll never know what to improve on.
Right.
Right? And same goes with my cookies. If they didn't give me feedback that my cookies were horrible, I would never know how to bake a better cookie. And so my point to them was, if you don't ask for the feedback from the people whom you're teaching, then you'll never get better. You'll never know what could help them more. And that's the point. The point of us teaching is to help other people. And if we're not doing that effectively, well, we all have deficiencies and strengths. How do we make the deficiencies strengths? How do we make, in more scriptural terms, how do we make our weaknesses become strengths, right? Yeah. But if we don't ask for that feedback, we will never know. I remember in one ward, one person got up, fast in testimony, bearing her testimony, had tears and just said, thank you so much, Sister so-and-so, for teaching a great Sunday school lesson. I love it. Two things are wrong with that. Number one, that person was co-teaching. What does it say about the other teacher? That's the first thing that came to mind. It was not intentional, but it was definitely there. Second thing, that's an aside. But the second thing is, if that's the feedback you get and you base how good you are, let's say that for teaching, based on someone getting up and saying, Sister so-and-so, you're so good, then it's the wrong thing, because at the same time, I heard from a number of other people that they can't stand that sister teaching. Her style did not work with a lot of other people, but it did work with a lot of people. And so half of the people were excited about it and half the people weren't. And if she only heard from the people who were excited about her, then she's never going to really improve if she just goes off of that specifically. And so we're always trying to get better, but the feedback part is difficult. Now, you said you get feedback. How do you get feedback? What do you do specifically to get feedback?
Okay, there are a couple of things, but can I answer that question in just a second?
Yes.
Are you telling me that negative feedback is more valuable than positive feedback?
No.
Okay.
But when it is the only thing that you hear, it can be slanted one way rather than, and it could go the opposite way. It is deceiving. If you hear only negative feedback, I'll give you another quick example. My wife and I were in charge of a big steak event at one point, and we got complaints constantly. And then we realized, wait, that's only 5% of the people who are complaining all the time. They're not saying anything, but they're actually enjoying themselves. And so this is actually successful. We're just getting a whole bunch of negative feedback. And so we're thinking that it's going off horribly when it really wasn't. And so it can go both ways easily.
You know, it's interesting because when you talk about that, like, I think that sometimes we can get caught up in the negative feedback and it can become really demoralizing, and we have to put it in perspective. Like you said, that represented a small amount of people that actually felt that negative way, right?
Yes.
And I think that that's part of the problem with negative feedback, is that we take it so personally, and it becomes so, like, it's really hard to hear. And then the positive feedback is just as dangerous, because it might feed our ego and we might think everything is fine, but it's doing nothing for helping to point out our blind spots, which are called that for a reason, because we can't see them.
Right.
So I bring that up because I think that I almost elicit feedback in a way that makes it safe for people to give them positive feedback, but doesn't necessarily make it safe for them to give negative feedback.
That is very, very typical.
Right. It's almost,
do you
ever feel like sometimes people are fishing for compliments in the way that they ask you for feedback?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So you have to be, I think that in a work setting, for example, if we're trying to get feedback, we give people the luxury of anonymity. And I wish that wasn't a prerequisite to honesty. Like, I wish that people didn't need to be anonymous in order to actually be honest about how they felt. But I have a different view of feedback. Like, I truly believe that feedback is the breakfast of champions. Like,
I like that.
In your life, should be consistently seeking feedback if you actually want to improve. Now, some people don't want to improve.
Correct.
And so feedback is just demoralizing and horrible. And it's like, no, I don't want to do this even more than I didn't want to do it before.
Yes.
And so that's different. So when you ask how I seek feedback, I actually am really careful about who I seek it from. Like, people that I genuinely trust, and I'll often ask specific questions. So instead of just saying, how do you think that went? Because most of the people that I trust are gonna be like, oh, that was great. Like, as an initial thing, I'll ask something like, I was trying to make sure I did such and such, and I feel like I might have missed the mark. Can you help me figure out how to do better? Or specifically, I don't actually care what I did right. I want you to help me make it better. And so when
Good.
you're talking about or seeking feedback, asking for help to make it better, I think helps people to frame it in a way or to feel like what they're delivering to you is constructive and desired
That's
versus
good.
could potentially hurt you. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of feedback comes from observation.
Yes.
So that would be my answer to your question about how do you
Okay.
seek feedback.
Good. 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 I like that. Again, I like that you're seeking feedback. It's if we want to be a better teacher, we have to seek feedback. That's
Right.
kind of a prerequisite to getting better. If we don't and just take what comes at us, then for good or bad, it could sway us either way. But we have to actually seek real feedback. And I really love that you mentioned that you didn't just say, how was that? How'd that go? How was class today? Or whatever, right? You focused on specific questions of, this didn't come across very well. I don't think, maybe. I don't know. What do you think? Did I get that point across? Or something along those lines. It goes back to the questions, the 5 different types of questions. Yeah. And when we ask questions, is a binary question will not be nearly as effective as other types of questions. Was that good today?
Did that go all right?
Yeah, done. All right. Feel good, right? No, you can't do that, right? You want to even get to the explanatory side where, how did this come across to you? Can you give me some feedback as to how that came across? And then they can say, okay, this is how I felt that it came across, or this is the result of what I saw when you asked these questions or the point that you're trying to make, right?
Okay, I like that. You know what I've done before that just struck me as actually a way of eliciting feedback?
What's that?
Is I will ask at the end of class, can you tell me what my main point was? And I'll ask the students to articulate back to me what they took away, what they heard.
That's good.
And so but I didn't even think of it as being a way to elicit feedback, but it really is. It's like, did I teach effectively? Well, if you can't articulate it back to me, then apparently not.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I'll have to add that one. So let me give another way that is not conventional at all and won't work with every audience at all, but it will work for some. And it's to go the route of getting hardcore feedback. Send everyone a link and say, I would love your honest opinion of the class and teaching and where I need to improve. Will you take the short survey?
Wait, is that giving the gift of anonymity?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can totally do it anonymously. Actually, it would be best to do it anonymously in most cases. Yep. There you go. Please let me know. I'm teaching gospel doctrine. There's a lot of people there. How do I do this better? How do I help you learn better? And then the questions you want to be thinking about if you decide to do this should be really thought through.
Mm-hmm. The questions of the survey, you mean?
Yes. You don't want to ask too many questions. So you need to make sure that the questions are really, really good and get to the heart of what you're trying to. And when you do that, you could take those questions from many different angles of teaching style. Do I show that, is it okay? Am I showing enough love in there? Mm-hmm. Skill, you could go off the depth of doctrine and principles that it could be from a lot of different contexts. So, but I think the most important thing is that we're asking for feedback.
You're inviting feedback by doing that.
Yes.
You're actively seeking it.
Yeah. But yes, it does. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be through a link and a formal survey. It doesn't have to be that way. I think that is one way that it can be done.
Yeah.
Right. But like you said, you just ask some real good questions from people you trust. Now, what about people that you don't have a good connection with? How would you feel about asking one of your good questions like that to get some feedback from someone that you don't really know very well, or someone that you actually may even be at odds with?
So I actually think that would probably be the most valuable feedback.
It might be.
Yeah, like because they're going to be less concerned about my feelings if we're at odds. So you
Sure.
don't just go, if you are seeking genuine feedback, you're not validation seeking.
Right.
And interestingly, like I think that oftentimes we will discuss things with other people that we know are going to validate us instead of seeking out people that think differently than we do. And so I think there's value. Am I throwing your point off by
No,
saying that? Okay.
no. Again, I didn't have, I don't think
You
there
didn't.
is a correct answer to that. Although I love where you're going with that. Absolutely. If we ask people who we normally wouldn't, will they give us okay. So my mind just went like 5 different, just splintered all of a sudden.
And I want to add to what you said when you're done. So remind me to add to
Okay.
your.
I'll give an example here. I used to, and I'm almost positive I haven't shared the story, but I used to be a consultant at NASA. And when I was there, we were encouraging the director to do more work from home situations, allow employees to work from home more. And so the director at that point said, we kind of wore him down a bit, and he's just like, fine, okay. Here's what we're going to do. And he sent this email to everyone. You can work from home if you get your manager's approval and you get your manager's approval. And it can be only 1 day a month. And you have to write a report on what you did while you were at home and get it approved by your manager and your manager's manager.
So let's create so much work that you don't want to work from home.
There you go. That's basically what it was. And then so I don't want to say no one, but basically no one took him up on the offer. No one did that. And his response back was, see, no one wanted to do it anyways.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting. Yep.
Yeah. He spoiled the well by the way he conducted it all. And what he did was create an environment where no one wanted to tell him the truth.
Right.
No one wanted to just come up and say, this is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. We're not going to do this because you've made this ridiculous. They didn't say anything. They didn't want to be called out.
Feedback.
Right. They all backed off, and his assumption then was, yeah, you didn't want to do it anyways. You guys pushed me for this, and they didn't even want to do it. Yeah. So when we ask for feedback, we have to create that space. We have to create that the safe space, and a very obvious vulnerability that I want feedback, and I want you to be brutally honest.
Right.
I want you to tell me what I don't want to hear.
Right. So, if you are genuinely, like, you think about the times when the prophets and apostles have described in a talk what their counsels are like.
Sure.
And they're like, we are all people with really strong opinions, and you need unanimity before you make some kind of a change in the church. Mm-hmm. And they don't, just for the sake of making it easy, roll over and play dead so that we can have some agreement. Instead, they bring all of their best thinking to the table, and that's welcomed. I think that the most valuable feedback that we can receive is somebody who has a perspective that's different from our own. And yes. So looking for and at people who think differently than you do for that feedback, I think, is actually a really important prerequisite. It has so much more value when it comes from people who think that differently than you do. And you creating this kind of, I guess not creating, but you showing in the way that you're asking for it, your openness and receptivity to it is going to be really important in people actually being willing to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I think what you're describing is so scary.
It is.
People.
You're spot on. It is very scary. And you have to want to progress past what you are at right now. I know a couple Sunday school teachers right now, they teach the youth and they do a fabulous job. All the youth love them. And they're like,
Right.
oh, I want to be in that class, right? Can they be better? Absolutely.
Right.
And I say that not as a dig on them, but because we all can. We can all be better, right?
Right.
But in what way?
How will they know unless somebody gives them feedback?
That's exactly it. How can I be better if I am not getting the feedback? Now, as another example, right now, as we are recording this, I'm looking at a teleprompter, at a camera behind a teleprompter, and I'm reflecting off the teleprompter this image of you and I.
Mhm.
So I can see myself and the way I react
You're getting
immediately. Immediate feedback, yes. Right? And I can see if I'm smiling or not, or right, or if I'm grumpy, I'm having a horrible resting face. Yeah. Do I have something in my teeth there? No. My wife, but up on the stand last Sunday, my wife afterwards said, "You had a horrible resting face, Kevin. That was horrible." I was like, I know. I was falling asleep. When I'm not engaged and I start falling asleep, I just get this horrible resting face. She goes, "Yeah, I think you're mad at everyone or something." No, I know. I'm just trying to stay awake or something, right? Yeah. So, but with this feedback, I can see immediately, and I have an earpiece in here where I can hear you and me and what I sound like at the same time, and I can tell that right now my voice is suffering from the cold that I had last week as well, right? So I can that's just that stuff. But there are other things like when we recorded the first two episodes, because I did this and I got immediate feedback, I realized that I was replying back with the word absolutely too often.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely, Julie, absolutely, absolutely. And if anyone goes back and counts the number of absolutelys, I think
don't do it. Don't
please. It's just bad. Let's just say that. But I recognize that because I got immediate feedback. Yep. There's not a lot of ways to do that when we're teaching a class, when we're teaching when I'm a missionary and I'm teaching someone new doctrine and new principles that they've never heard before. It's really difficult to get that immediate feedback, but it's always really important. In fact, that brings up, another point with missionaries. Missionaries have a time when they can talk to each other, specifically set aside to talk to each other about how well are we doing? Mm-hmm. Do we need to bring up any issues? And some of the issues can be and should be, how am I doing at teaching?
Right.
Right. But we don't have that as teachers. Maybe in a calling, we don't have that mechanism. But we really ought to somehow create that mechanism.
Like intentionally create it.
Correct.
That's a really, really great point. When you were talking about getting immediate feedback, the beauty of that is that you're able to correct it immediately.
Right.
And I think that really, truly, if you don't know what you don't know. Like it's just this horrible cycle, and you can't make adjustments or correct it based on what you don't know. Okay, so can I make one more point with that kind of goes to the people who are really scared of feedback? Because to a lot of people, this is a really scary thing. And if you're looking for feedback, you have to be so genuinely humble about it, or you're not going to get something that's of value. Correct. But here's the beauty of feedback. You may get stuff that you don't like, but you also get to pick and choose what you take on.
Yeah.
And so I talked to our staff about this in a professional setting quite a bit, how, seeking feedback isn't dangerous. It's not demoralizing. It's not any of those things. What it is like something you get to like sift through still, because they're like, I don't trust so-and-so to tell me. When they say it, I don't feel like it really is, with my best interest at heart and da-da-da. Well, then you can take it, thank them for it, and then choose to set it aside, because maybe it's not valid feedback. And I mean, fact of the matter is, whether or not it has validity is actually irrelevant. whether or not you're going to change because of it is what's most important. And
Right.
so you take and say, you know what, I really feel like that's something I can do something about, and then it has value to you. And so you still can take this, and you don't have to like have thick skin. I'm not suggesting that. You just get to decide what you are and are not going to take on.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
And yeah, yeah. And I love that because too often when we hear criticism, we feel, oh, that's just too much. I've got to work on.
I'm paralyzed. I can't do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not good at teaching because I have all these things to work on. We all do. Period. We all have all these things where we need to be better at, right? Or where we can be better at.
Right.
But I love that you said, choose one.
Yeah.
Ignore the rest. Who cares?
Right.
Just do one. Great.
Look for a theme. Look for a whatever. Look for a nugget that makes sense to you. Like,
Yes.
part of it is if it feels shaming, then that's not the spirit telling you you've got something to change. If it feels inspiring, then that's probably the
that's
spirit
good.
telling you, hey, let's work on this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
those kinds of feelings don't come from Heavenly Father, and you are doing his work when you are teaching his gospel.
I love that. I love that so much. That's a great way to know. Yes. So please do not just do it all and try to take it all on. Be okay.
Yeah.
One resource that the church gives us in Teaching in the Savior's Way, in the back, there is a Improving as a Christ-like Teacher, a personal evaluation. And I would highly recommend that everyone just start on a personal level. Where can what was that?
Like, give yourself feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and these are not the, am I using too many ums or likes when I talk, right? It's, I prepare myself spiritually to teach. I teach from the scriptures and the words of Latter-day Prophets. I help learners strengthen their relationship with Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. I invite learners to prepare to learn. Even if we went through and rated ourselves, and it suggests 1 to 4 here, if we rated ourselves on each of these, we're going to find enough. Right. We're going to find enough that, I really ought to focus on this one over here because that's good. If nothing else, that's good. But being able to get feedback from the people that we are teaching is also nice as well, because we will. Another brother, I remember, and my kids, when he would get up to speak or bear his testimony, he's at the pulpit, they would count how many times he would just reach up and touch the microphone. He had no idea he was doing it.
No.
Right? And if he did, he would recognize, I probably should stop that. But he just kept doing this over and over and over. And no one heard a thing he said. My kids were just counting 1, 2, 3. And it was like within 5 minutes, it was in the 50s. I mean, it was really that often that he was doing that. So we do need to get feedback from self-evaluation. We should get feedback from asking questions in many different ways. Those questions could be asked, like you said. But I think probably the most important feedback we can get, you mentioned at the very beginning, and I'm really glad you did. It's from the Spirit. The Spirit will teach you all things, even how to be a better teacher. Because when we're better teachers, we are more effective at helping those we teach come closer to Christ. And that's our main objective right there.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that. Right. Don't say that with insecurity.
Right. Yes. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, was just getting feedback. So as a takeaway, grab a copy of Teaching in the Savior's Way, go to the back and do a self-evaluation.
Yep.
As step 2.
Can I suggest 1A?
Yes.
Like, before you do that, like, pray about it. Like,
good.
pray that the Spirit will kind of open your mind as you're doing it. Like, you don't want to know what your own thoughts are. You want to know, like, you want what you like, give yourself this feedback. You want it to be informed by the Spirit. Like, you want to be guided in your own answers.
Yes. I like that. Please. It's preparing, like we
Right.
prepare for the sacrament.
Right.
Prepare for getting the feedback. You know what? I just thought of one more, and I'm glad I remember this before we ended. This is scary. I've had this happen, and I didn't invite this, but I'm glad it happened. But I would highly recommend that you ask someone who you know is a good teacher to come in and sit on your class for the sole purpose. I know it's scary. For the sole purpose of evaluating you. Don't do anything different. Just be yourself, teach the class, and then afterwards say, straight up, give it to me. I want to hear where I can be better.
Yeah.
That is scary.
Tell them that that's why you're inviting them even.
Yes, absolutely.
I want your feedback.
Yes.
Can I sorry, go ahead.
Ask a member of the Sunday school presidency if you're teaching Sunday school. Ask them to come and do that specifically. If you are in young women's, ask the young women's president to come in. And ask those good questions of the young women's president, or Relief Society, or Elders Quorum, whatever it may be. But get the feedback and have them focus. And it's different because I think the feedback will be different. If you went to the Elders Quorum president and said, hey, how am I doing as a teacher? Great. Am I doing this? Well, yeah. But if you came and said, will you please come observe me and watch me and then give me feedback? Yep. Right? The first one is off the cuff. Yeah, from the last time I remember you teaching, or yeah, I wasn't really thinking. I was actually thinking about this other brother that I was supposed to help. I wasn't even actually paying attention to your teaching, but yeah, you did a good job. Right? But when they're focusing on your teaching, then they can even write notes down.
Right. They're filtering it through that lens.
That's right.
The whole experience through that lens. Yeah.
And they will pick up things that they had never seen before, and you've never seen before as well.
Right. I love that. I think that's a
scary one, though.
Terrifying suggestion. Terrifying.
It is.
I love it.
But it's good.
You know what the other thing is, Kevin? This is what I was going to say, is that don't be afraid to watch body language for the intention of feedback. Like, yes. I feel like Ursula, never underestimate the power of body language. But like, there really is something powerful in like not being afraid to say, okay, I'm losing people sometimes. Why am I losing people? Then seek feedback on that. Hey, I'm noticing that people seem to be getting a little bit distracted during class. Any ideas? What's going on? And and there could be something that people could actually tell you that would help you to understand that. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Watching their body language can be a great way for us to know what questions to ask when we're seeking feedback.
I love that.
Help us to be aware of gaps.
I want to add one thing to that, because looking at body language, I'm completely on board. I have a feeling that there will be many people who are not at the point where they can even notice the body language because they're just trying to get through a lesson, right? They're just trying to get the content out or have people read or whatever it is. But I will say to those people, if you're at that level of, I'm just trying to do it, I bet that you read body language when you're not even trying to read body language.
Right. You perceive it totally. It's not like, it comes naturally to a lot.
Yeah, it's there. Because if you watch someone roll their eyes, you're going to notice that. And that's part of the body language. Or if you see someone sit back and they're on their phone, that's part of the body language as well. And you notice that, and you may have interpreted that as, oh no, I'm not a good teacher, or whatever it is. That is certainly, don't assume that.
Yeah, don't do that.
No.
Okay, so two things really fast. I know we're trying to wrap up, and it's like,
that's okay.
I've actually, at the beginning of, specifically when I'm doing like a talk for something like a fireside or a large group presentation, I will specifically tell them, just so you know, I'm a big body language watcher. And so if you're bored, make it obvious. I'm watching for it. Like if you're not jiving,
that's good.
Give it to me on your face. Like, I'm looking for it. And then when I call them on it and say, hey, you're not jiving with me, are you? Or, hey, I saw a confused look on your face. Was that what I just said? Like, I can actually, because I tell them I'm watching, they are more in tune with their own body language instead of being lazy about it.
That's
So just
great.
a thought. I
I've
don't know, I've
never
done that
done that
before.
before.
It helps me
Huh.
because then I know that, like, they know I'm watching them.
Hmm.
And then I feel like we can talk about it. And it's not like, why is she calling me on the carpet? It's more like, hey, she's really looking for signs that I'm engaged or not engaged.
That's
And then
good.
it feels more like, okay, I got to show her I'm invested. And also, I mean, I take so much energy off of that. And so to me, it's such a blessing when people will actually have a confused face, because then I'm like, oh, that didn't land. Let's go back. Let's say it again. I'm noticing, I'm looking at your faces. I'm seeing some confused looks. And then they're like, oh, she's paying attention. Like, she's watching us. And so they're more in tune with their own reactions to things as well. So I do think that that helps kind of create the vibe that you want. Just a thought.
Hmm.
And then I had a second thought, and now I can't remember what it was. Hold on. We're pausing. Body language. I can't remember. It's gone.
Okay. I'm going to add one thing that you made me think of,
Okay.
and maybe you'll remember it in that time. This even goes for within families. It may be a little bit more difficult on many different levels to get that feedback, but talk about body language. How many times have we started doing a come follow me lesson, or my family studies preach my gospel as well, right? I mean, how many times is it, oh, we got to do what again? All right. How long is this going to take?
Or I need a snack.
Right. Okay, I'll provide a snack. That's fine. But right. Or in a lecture situation, when you're trying to communicate with a child and teach them some principle of life and wrap it into the gospel, right? How do we get, I don't know the answer to this. I really don't. How do we get feedback besides body language and besides my kid saying, all right, Dad, I know you asked the question, but you already have the answer. Why don't you just give me the answer instead?
Right. That's
I hear that from my kids.
Right. So hard. You know what, though? Here's something I just thought of. We've got to give a little bit of grace to our children who have ADD.
Sure.
I'm not even kidding about this. This is something that I battle in my home. My husband and my daughter are both ADHD. And if they are doing something else simultaneously, they are paying better attention. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but I think it's a really important
very
thing for us to
good.
file in our back pockets, that people's brains work differently and the way that they learn is different. And so we have to be a little bit careful that we don't write stories based on what we're observing and then take it on and be self-deprecating and all of that type of stuff. Like, we have to actually ask for feedback. We can't make assumptions about stuff like that, because oftentimes, honestly, I've learned this from studying the ADHD brain. I had to go get therapy so that I would understand how to better parent and better wife. Like, I gotta,
Wow.
and that's a, by the way, because I have such a different brain than my husband does. And an ADHD brain causes the person to need to do something else at the same time in order to be able to hear the other thing. Isn't that interesting?
That is really interesting. Now I'm wondering if I have ADHD.
Don't analyze. Just
take it. We'll just go with that.
We'll talk about it another time.
That's great. So another great perspective. So, and again, in the end, go do a self-evaluation.
Yep.
Go ask for feedback in some way that's appropriate. Prepare yourself by praying. Ask Heavenly Father, what can I do better? Go seek the feedback, and then don't try to do it all. Do one thing, and don't feel guilty about focusing on just one thing. Just do that one thing, and it may take you months, it may take you years. That's fine. Just do that. Just progress. And Heavenly Father, I really think, was it President Nelson said this, or am I quoting someone else? The Lord loves effort, something along those lines, right?
President Hinckley, try a little harder to be a little better.
There we go. Okay. I like that. Just a little bit. So all these things, right? The Lord will help magnify our efforts if we go and try. And that's what we got to do. We just got to try.
Yes.
So
love that. What a fantastic topic. I was not expecting that.
Well, there we go. There we
Loved
go.
it.
Thanks everyone for joining us again on Teaching Restored. And if you would, again, share this with others, comment. We would love actually in the comments, how have you received feedback and how do you feel about feedback?
Kevin, what if we ask for feedback in the comments?
Whoa. Let's do that.
Okay.
We're doing meta feedback here.
Practicing what we preach.
Whoa. Okay. This is our third real episode. How are we doing?
If you say so far so good, we will ignore you.
Give us something.
Give us some legit feedback. We want it. We want to be better. We want this to have value.
Yes.
Genuinely. So genuinely, like from our hearts.
Please, we can always be better. Let's do this. I like that. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.